Welcome, guys. My name is Jim. I am a tour guide. I teach the tour guide. I'm going to go through a little bit about what we're going to fly through today. You're going to study tourism. In this tour guiding, there are 3 modules: National Tour Management, which is essentially how to manage a tour; Irish Tour Guiding, which is really about the mechanics of tour guiding in Ireland, and the industry itself, so everything from Fáilte Ireland to Tourism Ireland and how the whole business works. And then there is cultural heritage and natural and cultural heritage, which is really learning about history, music, food, everything. It's the bit that everybody really wants to come. And the vast majority of the course is in that section, but the boring bit, tour guiding and tour management, is essential. Sometimes I say to people, it's a little bit like doing a manual handling course. You kind of have to do it because you've been told, don't walk people across the road when the traffic light is red and all that kind of stuff. So it's just that kind of stuff. But it is essential to go through. I'll go into that in more detail. And then that is the basic 3 modules. The classes, a third of this is in class, online classes, and then 2/3 of it is self-directed learning. You are going to be introduced to rabbit holes so big you didn't even know they existed, because it's endless learning. One of the aspects of being a tour guide is that, especially if you're doing it professionally and if you're doing it long term, it's constant learning. But it's really good for people, particularly people once they hit the second half of their life, because it's that lifelong learning thing. I absolutely love learning. So I'm going to be giving you assignments. There's going to be exams, and then there's going to be out in the field, doing walking tours, doing a coach tour, and assessments on that. Over 60%, I think there's 300 points overall, and 160 of those points come from out in the field. So me assessing you from what you've learned, and that's a huge part of that, comes at the end of it. You're going to learn about the role of a tour guide. What is a tour guide? And they come in many, many different forms these days. When I started tour guiding, the very simple way I say to people is, back in Trinity College, there were no walking tours going through Trinity College. And then it came to be the place where there were so many that Trinity banned them. And now they start their own walking tour company, etc., etc. So tour guiding has become a massive profession relative to what it was when I started over 20 years ago. There are hundreds of tour guides in Ireland. I was talking to somebody who's a guide in Florence, and she was telling me that there's 3,000 registered guides in Florence alone, and another 3,000 unregistered guides, 6,000 tour guides in one city. Now that's Florence and it's Italy, but it gives you an idea of the kind of demand, and we're heading in that direction. And it can be very sophisticated, and all of that. And I'll go into that as well. The how do you apply thing, that's going to be Brandon's department. Say something there, Brandon.
How to apply overall, it's pretty simple. It's at the end of this, but generally speaking, it's receiving your CV. As Jim mentioned there, one of the top questions that I get, and I get it quite a bit, is, am I too old to do this course? And what I've constantly said to people is, the application, the average age tends to be between I would even say high, so 39 to about 55, 60. And the truth is that there's a certain esteem that comes from, having a mature learner, but the mature learner application oftentimes is about life experience. It's not necessarily about what you've done academically. So when I get a CV, that's really all I ask for. I'm looking for a few key things. It's mainly about things like customer facing roles, or just sort of an indication that you're generally a people person. There's great jobs out there for somebody who maybe is extremely logistic and isn't really people focused, because you might make a great travel agent, for example. It might be that the operational side is what really excites you. But if you're somebody who loves getting up in front of people, loves telling people about it, I know I'm even the type that if I saw And you can tell by my accent, I'm very Canadian. But even if I were to see, some tourists in the middle of Grafton Street with a map out, I'd stop and I'd have to tell them and I'd show them where to go. And that's just who I am. So yeah, it's just about looking for those sort of things within a CV.
Cool. Thanks, Brandon. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slide. So yeah, it's a FETAC level 6 course. That's basically very simple. There's a 10 framework level, so it's not a master's degree. It's lower than it's a higher certificate. Basically, it's between the Leaving Cert and a degree. It's essentially a diploma, and there's 3 different modules, and then there's an overall diploma for tour guiding, national tour guiding. Okay, we will be focusing a lot on Dublin and Dublin region, but it depends on the profile of the people on the course. This is a national tour guiding course, and one of the distinctions, I think that I do compared to other courses, is that I try and cover the entire country. You're supposed to be a national tour guide. You're supposed to leave this course and be not necessarily capable of doing a tour anywhere in Ireland, but at least able to prepare to do a tour anywhere in Ireland. There is a huge amount of information in this. So it depends on where you're coming from and where you're aiming to, what you want to do as well. So different people, depends on what job roles you're looking at as well, and I'll talk about that later. But essentially, it's not a degree course, it's not that high, but there is a absolute mountain of learning to be done. For me personally, I do this professionally. It's how I make my living. A lot of people do it in different ways, and I'll talk about that later on as well. So when you pass the exams, you are you pass a QQI level 6 special purpose award in national tour guiding, blah blah blah, and that is national tour guide. Once you are qualified as a national tour guide, you can then register with Fáilte Ireland as a national tour guide. Okay. There are 2 tour guiding organizations in this country that I know of. The Association of Tour Guides in Ireland, ATCI, of which I'm a member, and I pretty much recommend everybody join them. They only accept qualified guides, and they're over 45 years in business. I used to be on the board of directors. It's a voluntary-led organization, but they have huge experience, and it's a great resource. And just there's about, I don't know, maybe 550 members at this stage. There's also the Independent Tour Guides Association. They accept, and you don't have to be qualified to join that organization, and they have a different structure, and they organize things. But it's not. I think it's about 5 or 6 years old. It doesn't have the same background. ACI are pretty much recognised by Fáilte Ireland and the government as being the representative organisation in Ireland for tour guides. During COVID, it was to ACI that the government went to write the guidelines for how to operate as a tour guide during COVID, etc., etc. I was one of a team of people who wrote those guidelines. So they're very much a recognised organisation in that sense. And you pick up work through it. You can also, you go on a register of tour guides that are that Fáilte Ireland produces as well. Both of those the membership organizations, one of the main reasons people join those organizations is to get professional insurance. Because a lot of tour operators won't employ you unless you're insured. The big tour companies, they will only insure qualified guides, and preferably qualified guides who are members of an organization that have insurance. And that's pretty much why these organizations exist, is to offer insurance on that basis. Next, what are you going to study? Oh my God, this is so introduction. These are essentially a lot of this is the course content. Introduction, tourism and tour guiding. Very quickly, structure of the Irish tourism market, the attributes of a tour guide, what it takes to be a tour guide. There are lots of different fields in this. So I have worked in coach tourism. I do a lot of walking tours. I have a lot of history and background in artisan foods and organic food. I do a lot of food tours. It comes through. I have a coach license. I can drive coaches, so I can do driver guiding. I have a limousine license, so I can do limousine tours. And so I have a broad spectrum of places that I can work. And because I work at a full time, for me personally, I mix and match, and I pretty much work freelance, and I pretty much work for myself most of the time. I do have people who supply me work, but most of the work I do is work that I generate myself. So it depends on where you're going to go. Then other people in the course have gone straight into OPW. So the course that I finished in the spring, before the course was even finished, there was a couple of those people who were already working on as site tour guides. So you might get a job as a site tour guide, and you're just doing the same tour over and over again, and that's a different thing. Now, I did day tours for one of the big day tour companies, so I'm doing the Cliffs and Moher Tour, or Kilkenny and Glendalough, or the Giants Causeway and Belfast, and I'm just doing the same tour over and over and over again. And I really recommend that to people who are starting off sometimes, because there's not a lot to learn in terms of the tour, but it's a great way to develop as a tour guide. So the material is only one aspect of it. It's how you tell it, how you do it. That's actually the real skill. And doing repetitive work is a great way of building those skills. You can learn all the history and you can learn all the things, but knowing how to tell it is the real key. We'll go into the main tourist markets and the type of tourists, and this is the main tourist markets for Ireland. So, I mean, the vast majority of people that I work with, I'd say over 95% are from North America. I do get some Europeans, and I get some Irish people and British people as well, but the vast majority is the North American market. It depends on where you are. If you're in an OPW site, you're going to be dealing with everybody. If you're doing walking tours, depending on the walking tour, you're going to be dealing with everybody. So and then the specialist walking tour as well. So we go into all of that. And then we're going to do architecture, because there's an aspect in tour guiding called look-see. So you have to tell them what they're looking at and tell them what they're seeing and explain it to them. So we will be going into architecture all the way from Newgrange right up to contemporary architecture. And buildings, and being able to make note, to know what a building is, to be able to describe what the difference between Glendalough and St. Patrick's Cathedral, the monastic site in Glendalough versus St. Patrick's Cathedral, and being able to talk about the architecture, and that vernacular architecture is really just old architecture. It's really just stuff that wasn't built with a plan. So Irish cottages, things like this. Tour planning will come in and have to put a tour together. You might get a phone call from somebody, can you do a 3-hour walking tour of Dublin? You need to be able to plan that tour. So we'll go into how to do all of that. Customer handling skills. It's all very romantic when you're looking at it from the outside and going, oh, I'd love to be a tour guide. But then you get in and you get the difficult customers. There are the classic things. 99% of complaints are about the same thing over and over again. So it's just knowing how to manage those things and how to manage the demands of a tour operator. So if you're working for somebody else, they're giving you a tour. They need you to be on time. They need you to keep the tour to whatever time limits is on, all that kind of stuff. We'll go into communication skills, and you're going to be, this is where, we all have our own style. The way I approach this course is I'm not just going to teach you these are the things that you could do, but it's more drawn out of you who you already are, and finding out who's this tour guide here, what kind of tour guide are you going to be, and then pulling that out of you. So I very much deal with people on a one-to-one basis in that way, because you're all going to have strengths. Some of you are going to be natural storytellers, some of you, but no history knowledge. Some of you are going to be loads of historical knowledge, but you've never worked at that, but you need to develop storytelling capabilities. Some of you are going to have great customer service capabilities, and communications capabilities, but you've never actually even thought about putting a tour together. So it just depends on what your backgrounds are, but I pretty much work with all of that. Group management to include diverse populations. Again, it's figuring out, if you've got loads of different people, how to manage groups. Do not quote me on this. It's like in the trades, there's a phrase that goes around, there's certain nations are notorious for being late. You know what I mean? So, and they all begin with I, the Israelis, the Indians, the Italians, and the Irish. That's a bit of a joke. It's not really serious, but it is. I would approach a German tour very differently to the way I would approach an Italian tour. I would approach an American tour very differently to the way I would approach a British tour. I would tell Irish history very differently to a group of people from Britain to the way I would tell it to a group of people from Dublin to the way I would tell it to a group of people from France. So it's knowing how to do that and knowing the references, because they're interested. You're not telling them your version. You are telling them your version, but you also have to pay attention to what they already know and perceptions that they have of Ireland. So the way French people perceive Ireland is very different to the way British people perceive Ireland. And it's knowing that and being able to work with that. Communication skills are essential. Health and safety is essential. First aid is essential. You don't need to have first aid course to qualify, but it is always recommended to have a qualification in first aid, especially if you're working in coach tourism. Jogger notes are, when you're starting off, everybody does it, but especially when you're starting off, I still do it sometimes, is having notes, what they call jogger notes. So, if you're stopping, if you're at St. Patrick's Cathedral, just 6 things that you're going to talk about at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And you just have a note on a 5x3 card, was the traditional way of doing it. Nowadays, you just put it on your phone. So you're just reminding yourself of what you want to say. It's a great way of remembering things that you forget if you get tongue-tied, but it's also a great way of keeping you between the lines, because we all have the capacity to talk too much. Mea culpa. Then essential information: banking hours, post offices, food, drink, where to go for food, where to go for a pint, where to go for coffee, where to go for an iced coffee. It doesn't matter what it is. You need to know these things. And that's a really big thing for me. Entertainment, all of that sort of stuff, that kind of knowledge, it takes time to build up your knowledge of Ireland, and particularly if you're out on the road. Even if you're on site, people might ask you questions, or you might want to tell them as well. It's all about service. And then historic sites and buildings are, it's Newgrange, Skellig Michael, all of these places. You need to know about all of these. We're not going to visit them all, but you're going to need to know about them all. So I'm going to be sending you off a lot of the time. You're going to be sent off, okay, go do research on that and come back with me with what you have. So I'll be showing you how to research, where to get the information, and I don't mean Wikipedia, and then come back and then distill it into a form that's palatable for tourists. So it's stripping it down. So storytelling comes into this quite a bit. Talking about architectural heritage, the different periods of Irish architecture and the history involved with all of that. Physical features of the landscape: rivers, mountains, lakes, seas, all of that thing. The really simple things. One of my favorite expressions when I'm out on the road is let the landscape do the work. You don't have to talk. Just be quiet. But tell them a few little things and don't be going on too much, because it's the landscape a lot of the time people come here for. We do agriculture and forestry because you have to explain the landscape. You have to explain why things are the way they are, what we do, what we don't do, why we do it. Same with fishing and maritime heritage. Archaeology, geology, soils, all of that kind of stuff. Again, it's just been able to explain the landscape. I personally believe in Ireland we have an innate relationship with the land, and people feel that as well. And then contemporary stuff. How much is school education? What's healthcare like? How much is university education? What's tax like? All of these things. People are constantly asking those things because they inevitably, as we all do, compare, and they want to know what it's all about. Okay? I'm going to skip the next one because it's about me, and I'm just going to. The course is blended learning. Okay, it's delivered online. All the classes are recorded, so if you can't make a class, it doesn't matter. You just go back and watch the recording. I give out assignments. So the class is managed through Moodle, which is on the Portobello platform. So all the classes will be listed there. And then when I'm giving you assignments, they'll be listed there. And then you will go off, do your assignment, and then upload it in through Moodle. And there's also, so that's one aspect of it. There will be assignments. And then there is what they call a knowledge bank. You have to build up this huge bank of knowledge in the whole country, essentially. And one of the ways I do this is with the class is nearly always full. Since I've been doing it, it's been full. Instead of having 15 people doing the same research on the same 15 places, what I do is I break the country up into sections and into teams, and then get you all to do the research, and then we pull all that together. So by the time you leave the course, you have a reasonably comprehensive set of information about the entire country. Not necessarily enough to go off and do a tour of Donegal alone, but certainly enough to send you on your way of figuring out what there is there and where to go finding out more, building up that. So that bank of knowledge is really, really important. And you will inevitably be drawn towards your favorite subject, because that's what you do. Food is big, front and central for me when I'm doing the tour. So you will have speciality things that you're interested in, and that's good. But you also have to learn about things that you're not interested in, and sometimes that's actually the most interesting thing. We do. Sorry, my brain's just stopped here. Doing research, it's constant. One of the, I essentially research all at this stage in the game nearly all the time, but especially in the winter time, I almost always do courses. So I'm doing a storytelling workshop in Cape Clear in October. Excuse me. Just because it's developing storytelling techniques. I've done whiskey courses, I've done specialist history courses, I've done architecture courses, art history courses, etc., etc. And all of this is all the time adding. And when I travel, I try and get tour guides as well, because when you travel, especially to countries where your clients are coming from, understanding their mindset is really, really good, because it gets you to be able to understand why they might be interested in what you're interested in. So there's a lot of that, a lot of research, a lot of practice, a lot of research. It's I can't emphasize that enough. And then writing up what is in this program known as coursework. So writing up, whatever it is, 300, 500, 1,000 words on some site, or on Irish music, or on things like this, just to get you started on all of this. And I would break the class up into sections and have you all doing different things. And then you will be presenting on these as well, because the presenting part of it is getting you used to standing in front of people and talking, because that's a really, really big part of this, getting you used to that. 2 classes a week. I think it's normally Tuesday and Wednesday. And then there are practicals where we go out. So I will take you on a walking tour of Dublin. I will take you on a coach tour. So you're going to be basically doing one of my tours, a walking tour of Dublin with me, and you're also going to do a tour or two somewhere. And then you're going to do that yourself. At the end of the course, you're going to do a walking tour. Now, you're not going to do a 3-hour walking tour. You're going to do a section of a 3-hour walking tour or a 4-hour walking tour, whatever way it is. And then the same thing on a coach. So I'll be testing those skills as well. And it's just it's all about presentation and getting over the fear of doing all of that. quite a few of the people that the last class I had was quite unusual. I don't know anything about you guys, but there was absolutely nobody that had experience in the tour guiding business at all. Normally, I have people who are already in the business, whether they are drivers or tour guides, and they're just coming back to get the badge because it's handy to have. It's good to have the accreditation. But the last class I had, it was a complete class of novices. And it was really good because they supported each other really well, and they would go off and meet in town and, do a walk around themselves or whatever. So on the days when I have you coming up, we'll do a walking tour, but I will get other things in on those days. So I'm going to try and squeeze, a full day into that. So a trip into the National Museum would probably be done on the same day I'm doing a walking tour. I live in Dublin. I'm a big fan of the National Museum. I try to bring as many people in there as I can, because it's a great way of presenting the physical artifacts that we talk about when we're in places and seeing them. So one of the assignments that you will have is to choose something in the National Museum and then do a presentation on it. And we'll be doing these in the class. I'll be recording them, but that'll be all part of the assessment process as well. So in the assessment, you're assessed on coursework, which I think is 50 points. I might not be bang on accurate on this, out of 300. And then you're assessed on the exam, which is 90 points out of 300, and then 160 for the practical. That's the way it breaks down. So all of those things you will be doing. In terms of the volume of work is actually in the coursework and the assignments, but the coursework in particular. Now, some people take the attitude, well, there's not that many points, so I don't need to do that much. That's fine. The reality is, to be a really good tour guide, you really need to do the work. And how much you put into this is how much you get back out of it. I am over 20 years since I started tour guiding, and I'm still learning. And it's the fact that you're still learning. What I learn in the winter is what I bring into the new season. And it keeps you fresh. It keeps you on your toes. And it stops you sounding like you've been saying the same thing for 25 years, even though sometimes you are saying the same thing for 25 years. The next one. Yeah. So the blended learning thing, there's classes, and then you're going to be going off doing your own thing. I'm going to give you a list of books to get, some very simple books, just for research. But after that, it really is how much you put into this. So if some of you are, obsessive the way I would be, I would readily admit it. You're going to have a great time. Most people love it because it's endless and it is really fascinating. And one of the reasons people ask me why do I like being a tour guide is because I'm constantly working on the Irish creation myth and the Irish sense of history and Irish identity. So it's a personal thing as much as it is anything else, and then sharing that. And that's what people want. I'll come back to something else to say about that, but I'll keep that till the end. One-to-one support. I will almost always, I will set up a WhatsApp group for the class, and then there's always a huge amount of communication in the WhatsApp group about just what did I mean by this and what do I mean by that. And if you need to contact me and ask for something, then that's probably the quickest way. Quite often I'm on the road. So emails is something that I try to avoid when I'm on the road, but I do WhatsApp and I do phone calls because it's easier. When I'm out touring, I'm out touring, and I don't want to be thinking about administration as much as possible because it's just not the way my brain works. So I said I talked about the assessments. The exam, you will be examined on there's 3 different modules. So tour guiding, Irish tour guiding, and national tour management is one thing, and then there's the Irish culture, natural heritage and culture. In the exam, the way I've done them so far is that there are essentially 3 sections. The first section is on tour guiding. It's going to be short questions, okay? Relatively short questions. you'll have to be fairly talented to fail this. I'm going to say that as well, because I'm very particular about the way I do this. It's not, if you do the work, you're going to pass the exam. It's as simple as that. It really is as simple as that, because it's not rocket science what I need you to do in this. So short questions. So we're going to ask questions, and you're just going to be doing paragraphs, short paragraphs for answers. Yes, I know this, but blah, blah, blah. What are the rules for this, blah, 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 etc. And the same with tour management, short questions. And then when it comes to our Irish natural heritage and culture, that's more complicated. I'm going to be asking short questions and then really long questions. So you're going to be writing fairly detailed essays in that, okay? But I will give you a little bit of a heads up on what those subjects are likely to be, so you won't be going into that totally blind. And then there will be multiple choice questions at the very end as well. There's a 3-hour exam. It's if like me, I did my Dublin badge in 2013. I hadn't done an exam in years. I was panicking, but it's not that difficult. And if you have nerves about doing the exams, that's just we can talk about that. It really isn't all that difficult. Any questions so far?
I do have one there just about the insurance, and is it covering things like a possible slip and fall, that kind of thing?
Deirdre, I hope you have methods to help us remember it all. Oh, I do. That's the whole point. That's actually one of the most important parts of it all. I will come back to you on that now in a second. The role of a tour guide is to manage a positive and safe manner with the control of important aspects of a tour and put redundancy plans into place. Basically, you're in charge of a group of people, usually who have paid somebody else and they've hired you to come in as a tour guide, or they paid you directly and you're coming in as a tour guide. So, it's literally, and I say this with a smiling face, don't be jaywalking. I'm one of the most famous jaywalkers around Dublin, but just, it's a whole thing. You have to be really careful. You have to mind them. And then telling stories and being involved and drawing people in. When I did my Dublin badge, which I did in Portobello in 2013, the number one reason people came to Ireland was the landscape, and the number two reason was to meet Irish people. When I did my national badge in 2018, it was the other way around. The number one reason people were coming to Ireland was to meet Irish people. The good news is that means you're a tourist attraction. Don't disappoint. And that's really, really true. Well, when you get that, when you understand how fascinating we are, people don't go to France to meet French people. They don't go to Italy to meet Italians, but people come to Ireland to meet Irish people. That is really important. So that storytelling thing, that whole thing is part of it, and it's really, really important. And we go into that a lot. And everybody is different, so I won't be telling you to do it this way. I'll be figuring out what way you're going to do it. Who is this person? And then bringing that out as much as possible. Entertain your guests and leave them with a memorable and enjoyable experience, which they will share with others. Now, this is really important. I do not teach history. I teach public history. And there is a distinction between history and public history. Public history is history that exists in the public realm, and it is almost always wrong. So, and the minute you go down this road, you're straight into controversy, and you can't avoid it. If you look at what actual history is, the academic historians and what academics look at from a historical point of view, if you want to look, the way I say this all the time, tourists and American tourists, guys, when they come to write the history of the 2016 American presidential election, what are they going to say? In 100 years' time, when they're writing that, what are they going to say? They're already beginning to have arguments and to frame who said what happened, and what was the consequences. What is written and told to the public is public history. The actual history is much more complicated. The actual history requires multiple perspectives, multiple presentations, and then almost certainly no conclusions to be drawn. because history is so complicated, you can't actually conclude anything. Can we draw a conclusion about what, the effect of British colonialism was in Ireland in a short paragraph and say that it's accurate? No. And it's the same thing. So when you know that you're working in the realm of public history, it gives you a certain amount of freedom to exercise the golden rule of tour guiding, which is never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And when you tell them that up front, they're very, very happy, because that's actually what they're there for. They're not there for a history lecture. And you're not going to be here with me for a history lecture either. And I'm not going to give you a history lecture. So one of the things that I really do is teach all of this as the tour guiding and develop it as a story. So if I'm teaching you history, what I'm really doing is giving you historical data and then getting you to tell me that as a story and to tell the class that as a story. So it's pulling that out. Now that might sound really difficult, but it's actually really easy. Based on one assumption. Rule number one of being a tour guide is you need to love the sound of your own voice. So I'm assuming you're all talkers and you love your country, and there's reasons why you want to be a tour guide. And whatever that is, it doesn't matter what it is. Whatever it is what they want. They want your interpretation of Ireland, not the interpretation of Ireland. But it has to be balanced, not biased. And that's what we do. I do that a lot. I work on that quite a lot. Next one, how to apply.
Actually, sorry, while you're
so I'm just going to go back here and tell
Jim,
you a
can you hear
little
me?
bit about me.
Can you, Jim?
Hi,
Nope.
My name is Jim. I'm going to be your tour guide. I'm going to be your tutor. I began tour guiding in 1999. I had a catering company. I had somebody who I was involved in the organic food business, in the whole food business, in the artisan food business. And I had somebody who hired me to do a retreat, but the retreat was moving around to different locations. And they had a tour guide. They had a tour operator, a small guy, just a very small company. And I got on really well with him. And he said to me, "You'd be a great tour guide. Do you want a job?" And I said, yes, I loved it. I just took to it like a duck to water. And the first tour you ever do will either be the worst tour you will ever do, or it'll be the best. And the reality is it'll probably be a mixture of both. And I had a great time. I really, really enjoyed it. And then I worked private tours, pretty much exclusively private tours, for a couple of seasons. And then I left tour guiding, and then I came back to it in, I don't know, when the financial crisis was on. I was working in a restaurant, and that went belly up. And somebody said to me, "Do you want to do day tours?" And I worked in day tours for 5 years for one of the biggest day tour companies in the country. And I managed their team of tour guides. I basically took people who had never tour guide before, and I mean literally never tour guide before, and turned them into tour guides. So I began training tour guides, and we ended up being the number one day tour company. They still are the number one day tour company in the country, but with a bunch of people that I had essentially trained. And the techniques that I used, which is drawn out from the people, who they are and what they want to do, is what I do in this class. Because I found it quite effective. You don't have to tell them what, you just get the people to do what they will do normally. And it was really, really good. And then I got fed up doing that, and I left, and I got I took on my driving badges, on my D license and a PSV license. Once you have a steering wheel in your hand and you're a tour guide, you will never be short of work, ever. There is a huge shortage of drivers, and tour guide drivers in particular. Irish tour guides even in more particular. So you'll never be short of work. And I did that for a few years, doing just for various different companies. And then maybe, I don't know, 5 years ago, I pretty much started out on my own. And every year goes by, I work more and more for myself all the time. It's very much seasonal. So stretching the season is how you make a full-time job out of this. So if you can start in February and end in November, that's really, really good. Usually the season is May to October, sometimes June to September. It depends. You can work on cruise ships. I've done cruise ships. I've done all of that. Food comes up a lot. I do food tours. I do a lot of food stuff on my tours. And I've done some extended tours, like I do just day trips as tours, or I could be going away for 10 days with two couples or a family in a car. And I'm it. That's it. You are now taking these people on holidays. So my approach today is I get paid to take people on holidays, and I have a great time doing it. It's really, really good. I really enjoy it. But it's tiring, so I break it up. So I get to sleep in my own bed. I'm back in Dublin now until the 10th of September, and then I'm off again, and then I'm back in my own bed. So you mix it up, and the variation keeps you fresh. So I can do walking tours. I can do specialist walking tours in Dublin. I could do a walking tour in just about any town in Ireland with a little bit of notice, and then off we go. So that is really it. That's about all I have to say about me. I started teaching in Portobello. This will be my third class in Portobello. I really enjoy it. I qualified to be able to do this training years ago, but never did it. And people have been saying to me for a long time I should be training people officially. So when Portobello asked me to do this, I jumped at it, and that is pretty much that. Brandon, I'm going to throw that slide in there and let you talk a little bit about how to apply.
I'm just going to mute Jim for a second then. There we go. Just while I go through the process of enrollment. So if it is the case, you'll see my email up above. You can always send me a CV. I'm happy to then have a look over and we can have a discussion. They also send a link to my meeting link, so you can always book a meeting with me. When it comes to the actual, and there's my direct phone number as well, I'm always happy to take a call, sort of same as Jim. When it comes to actually booking the course, you just do that straight on the website. It does give you a few options. You have the option of doing a fees and full booking, or you can do the deposit and the installment option. But essentially, it's just a matter of registering once you're confirmed that you actually want to do the course, that this is the right course for you. We're happy to take you on. And then I would say, though, that by the end of this month, the last day, or by about I would say the first week of September would probably be where we start to look at the capacity of the course. So I'd recommend just enrolling before that if you do. I also often get asked about multiple intakes. We have a second intake that happens in February. So we have this one coming up and then one in February, and those are the only two that we do each year. I'll wrap things up just to say thank you guys all for coming. It was a pleasure. Really appreciate you taking the time this evening. If you do have any questions, you see my contact details just above. I will be happy to have you. Hope to see you join. All right, we'll hang out for the next little bit, but thank you very much.